The air in the ancient chamber tasted of dust and secrets. Dr. Elias Mercer ran his gloved fingers across the strange symbols etched into the wall, his headlamp cutting through darkness undisturbed for millennia. 3 weeks on this forgotten moon, and finally, a discovery worth the Federation's investment. "Maya, are you getting this?" he asked, adjusting the camera mounted on his shoulder. His AI assistant's voice crackled through his helmet. "Recording, Doctor. Preliminary analysis suggests these markings predate known settlements in this sector by at least 8,000 years. Elias nodded, excitement building as he followed the symbols to a recessed alcove. Something gleamed within, metallic and distinctly out of place among the stone ruins. "There's an artifact here, approximately 20 centimeters in length, appears to be made of. I'm not sure what material this is." The object was shaped like an elongated hexagon, its surface iridescent with swirling patterns that seemed to shift under his light. Despite being buried for millennia, it showed no corrosion. "Caution advised," Meyer intoned. "Unknown technology." Elias chuckled. "That's why we're here." He carefully extracted the artifact, surprised by its warmth. As soon as it cleared the alcove, lines of blue light awakened along its edges. "Energy signature detected," Maya warned, but Elias was already transfixed. The object hummed in his hands, its vibration resonating through his gloves and into his bones. "It's responding to me," he whispered as the artifact unfolded like a mechanical flower, revealing an intricate interior of crystalline components. A beam of intense light shot upward, penetrating the moon's crust toward the stars. "Alert signal broadcasting on multiple frequencies," Maya announced, her synthetic voice edged with alarm. "Doctor, protocol requires." "I know the protocol," Elias interrupted, unable to release the device as it seemed to meld with his touch. "But this is incredible. It's some kind of beacon or communication device. We've just made first contact with." The ground beneath him trembled. Stone dust rained from the ceiling as the beam intensified, pulsing in a distinct pattern. Then, as suddenly as it began, the light retracted, and the artifact folded back into its original form, though still glowing faintly. "Transmission complete," Maya informed him. "Signal propagation, unlimited range." Elias stared at the now dormant object. "We need to get this back to the lab." 17 light-years away, in the outer reaches of a dying star system, a prison facility hung in perpetual twilight. Inside the highest security cell, a woman with skin like polished obsidian opened her eyes for the first time in decades. Princess Via of the Australian dynasty felt the beacon's call vibrating through her suspended animation chamber. The royal artifact had been activated, impossible unless. The suspension fluid drained as emergency protocols engaged. Via gasped her first breath in centuries, muscle memory overriding atrophy as her body remembered its strength. The genetic locks in her cell recognized the royal command embedded in the signal and released their hold. "Identification confirmed. Royal bloodline via Kalor, House of Eternal Stars," announced the facility's ancient AI. Via stood, shaking regeneration fluid from her silver hair. The signal could only mean one thing. Against all odds, the prophecy was fulfilled. Someone had found her beacon, someone whose genetic structure was compatible with Australian technology. "Location of signal origin," she demanded, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Sector 9, Quadrant 4, Moon designation, Osiris." Via closed her eyes, calculating. Her enemies would have detected the signal too. She had little time. "Prepare my vessel," she commanded, making her way toward the hangar where her ship had waited, hidden in plain sight as a piece of prison architecture. "Set course for Osiris." As she boarded, Via accessed the ship's systems with her mind. The royal craft awakened to her touch, its weapons and shields dormant but intact. Her battle armor, once gleaming with the insignia of her house, lay damaged in its chamber, the chest plate cracked from her final battle. It would have to suffice. After centuries of exile, Princess Via was returning to claim what was hers, and the human who had summoned her, this unexpected ally, would either help her reclaim her throne or become another casualty in a war that began before his species had reached for the stars. The ship broke free of the prison's gravity well, accelerating toward Osiris, toward her destiny, toward him. The crash shook Elia's research station like an earthquake. He stumbled from his lab, artifact clutched protectively against his chest. as warning alarms blared throughout the facility. "Maya, what was that?" he called out, rushing toward the observation deck. "Unknown spacecraft has crash-landed approximately 800 meters northwest of the station," the AI responded. "Design matches no known Federation or Coalition vessels, scanning for life signs." Through the reinforced windows, Elias could see a trail of disturbed soil and smoking debris leading to a sleek craft half buried in the moon's dusty surface. Its metallic hull gleamed with the same iridescent quality as his artifact, which now pulsed in synchronization with lights flickering across the crashed ship. "One life sign detected," Meyer announced. "Humanoid, but readings are inconsistent with known species profiles." Elias hesitated only briefly before grabbing an emergency pack and his helmet. "Prepare the medical bay. I'm going out there. Protocol advises against. Someone could be dying out there, Maya." The moon's thin atmosphere necessitated his suit, though it was safe enough for brief exposure. Elias made his way across the barren landscape, the twin shadows of the planet this moon orbited stretching across the horizon. As he approached the crash site, a section of the hull retracted with a hiss of escaping pressure. A figure emerged, stumbling. Tall and graceful despite obvious injury, clad in strange armor that sparked and flickered with failing power. When the figure collapsed to one knee, Elias rushed forward without thinking. "I'm here to help," he called out, approaching cautiously. "Are you injured?" The helmet of the armor retracted, revealing a face of breathtaking beauty. Silver hair framed features both alien and familiar, skin dark as the space between stars, eyes luminous violet with vertical pupils that contracted in the daylight. A woman, or something like one, with an expression of fierce determination despite her obvious pain. "The beacon," she gasped, her voice musical yet commanding. "You activated my beacon." Elias froze. "The artifact you came for this." Her gaze fixed on the object still clutched in his hand. "You carry royal technology as if it were a trinket." She attempted to stand, but faltered, a shower of sparks erupting from the damaged chest plate of her armor. Without thinking, Elias moved to support her. "You're injured. Let me help you to my station." She stiffened at his touch, then relented as her armor failed again, sending what appeared to be a feedback shock through her body. "My systems are critically damaged. I require assistance." To his surprise, she allowed him to help her across the lunar surface to his research station. Inside the airlock, she removed her helmet completely, revealing pointed ears adorned with complex metallic ornaments that seemed to be part of her body rather than jewelry. "I am Via," she said simply, as if the name should mean something to him. "Dr. Elias Mercer, xenoarchaeologist," he responded, leading her to his lab rather than the medical bay. Something told him her needs would be beyond standard medical equipment. In the lab, Via removed her damaged chest plate, revealing a mesh undersuit that seemed fused with her skin in places. The technology was like nothing Elias had ever seen, organic circuits and crystalline components working in harmony with biological systems. "Can you fix it?" she asked, placing the damaged armor on his workbench. Elias examined the complex piece. "I don't know. This technology is far beyond anything I've studied." "Yet the royal beacon responded to you," Via observed, watching him curiously. "Your genetic structure must be compatible with our systems, a rare coincidence." As Elias worked, his curiosity overcame his caution. "Where are you from? What is this material?" Via's answers were measured, revealing little. A distant system, advanced technology, a mission of great importance. With each evasion, Elias' fascination grew. Days passed as he repaired her armor, learning its systems through intuition more than knowledge. Via remained guarded, though her disdain gradually gave way to something like respect as she watched him work. She began to assist, guiding his hands when he faltered, her touch sending unexpected shivers across his skin. "You have a natural affinity for our technology," she admitted on the third night, watching as he successfully reconnected a power conduit. "Most species cannot comprehend its complexity." "Most species don't have beautiful aliens crash landing in their backyard," Elias replied with a smile, then flushed at his own boldness. To his surprise, Via's lips curved upward, her first genuine smile. Perhaps the beacon chose wisely after all. That night, as Elias slept, Via stood at the window of his research station, looking toward the stars. Her armor was nearly repaired, her ship's self-healing systems almost complete. Soon she would need to reveal the truth about who she was, why she had been exiled, and what his activation of the beacon truly meant. She touched the royal insignia hidden within her armor, the mark of a princess believed dead for centuries. Her enemies would be coming. They would have detected the beacon's signal, would know she had found a compatible human. They would seek to destroy them both before she could reclaim what was rightfully hers. Villa watched Elias sleeping, vulnerability etched across his face. This human had shown her kindness without agenda, skill without arrogance. Something stirred within her that had nothing to do with royal duty or ancient vengeance. She would protect him when her enemies came, and they would come soon, of that she had no doubt. The explosion rocked the research station just before dawn. Elias jerked awake to the sound of alarms and Maya's urgent warnings. Multiple hostile vessels approaching, unknown configuration, weapons systems detected. Elias scrambled from his cot as Villa burst into his quarters, fully armored, her previously damaged chest plate now glowing with restored power. In her hand, she held a weapon that hummed with the same energy signature as the beacon. "They've found us," she said, her voice tight. "We have less than 5 minutes." "Who's found us?" Elias demanded, frantically pulling on his boots. "What's happening?" Villa's violet eyes met his, decision crystallizing in their depths. "The people who tried to kill me centuries ago, I can no longer protect you with silence." She extended her hand. "Come with me if you wish to live. I will explain everything, but not here." Another explosion hit closer, rattling the station's foundations. Elias grabbed his research pack and the beacon artifact, then took her offered hand. Her grip was strong, her skin surprisingly warm. "My ship is repaired enough for escape," she said, pulling him toward the station's rear exit. "We must reach it before they deploy ground forces." They raced through corridors filling with smoke as the station's systems failed around them. Through an observation window, Elias glimpsed 3 ships in orbit above the moon, sleek, predatory craft with the same iridescent quality as Villa's armor. "Maya, initiate emergency protocol Sigma," Elias called out. "Transfer all research data to my personal encryption key." "Compliance," came the AI's voice, already sounding distant as systems failed. "Transfer complete. Good luck, Dr. Mercer." Outside, the lunar landscape was illuminated by weapons fire as beams of energy struck the research facility. Villa pulled Elias toward her ship, now fully visible and humming with power. "They're targeting you specifically," she explained as they ran. "The beacon you activated was not merely a communication device. It's a royal artifact designed to identify genetically compatible individuals who can interface with our technology." "Compatible for what?" Elias gasped as they reached the ship. The hull opened at Villa's approach. Inside, the cockpit lit up as she settled into what appeared to be a command chair. "For this." She placed her hands on control surfaces that responded with light. Then, to Elias' shock, she removed a component from her armor and held it out to him. "Place this against your temple," she instructed. Hesitantly, Elias complied. The moment the device touched his skin, his mind exploded with information. Star charts, weapon systems, ship schematics, and most astonishingly, Villa's true identity. "You're a princess," he whispered, staggering under the weight of the knowledge suddenly flooding his consciousness. "Princess Villa Kaelor of the Australian dynasty, believed executed for treason 300 years ago." "Falsely accused," she corrected, her hands dancing across the ship's controls as it lifted from the surface. "My cousin Dracos orchestrated my downfall, convinced the High Council I was planning to share our technology with lesser species. They could not execute a royal, so they exiled me to a prison moon, erased me from history, and scattered the royal artifacts that could prove my legitimacy." The ship accelerated, evading energy blasts from the pursuing vessels. Elias gripped his seat, mind still reeling from the neural interface. "Why me? Why did the beacon respond to me?" Villa executed a complex maneuver, slipping the ship between her pursuers. "Your genetic structure contains markers similar to our royal line, extremely rare in humans. The beacon recognized you as someone who could activate royal technology, which only responds to those with the proper genetic key." "And that makes me what, your key?" Elias asked, the implications dawning on him. "In our culture, it makes you my astral complement." She glanced at him, something vulnerable flashing in her eyes. In your terms, perhaps, soulmate would be the closest concept. The word hung between them as the ship entered hyperdrive, stars streaking past the viewports. Elias stared at her, this alien princess who had crashed into his life 3 days ago, now claiming some cosmic connection between them. I don't expect you to accept this, Via said softly. But I need your help. With you, I can access the remaining royal artifacts scattered across the galaxy. With those, I can prove my innocence and reclaim my throne from those who betrayed me. And if I refuse? Elias asked, though he already knew his answer. Then I return you to the nearest Federation outpost and continue alone. She met his gaze directly. I will not force you, Elias. That would make me no better than those who hunt us. The use of his name, spoken with such gentle dignity, stirred something in his chest. This woman had been wrongfully exiled, erased from history, imprisoned for centuries, yet maintained her honor. These people just destroyed my research station and tried to kill us both, Elias said finally. I think I'd like to know why, and he held up the beacon artifact, which still pulsed in harmony with the ship's systems. I've spent my career looking for answers about ancient civilizations. I'd be a poor scientist to turn away now. A smile transformed Via's face, making her otherworldly beauty almost painful to behold. Then we fly to Karshiva Station. There we will find allies and the next artifact. As the ship accelerated toward distant stars, Elias felt the weight of destiny settling around them. Whatever cosmic coincidence had led him to activate her beacon, he was now irrevocably part of her story. A human archaeologist and an exiled alien princess, bound by technology, pursued by enemies, and connected by something neither fully understood. Through the neural interface, he sensed her relief, her determination, and beneath it all, a flicker of something warmer. Something that made his heart beat faster despite the danger surrounding them. The Karshiva station hung in the purple-tinged nebula like a massive, broken crown. A fitting metaphor, Elias thought, as Via guided their ship toward a hidden docking port. The station's unusual configuration, with 7 towering spires extending from a central hub, marked it as a trading post for species from across multiple galaxies. The station master is an old ally, Via explained, her fingers dancing across the ship's controls. One of the few who knows I still live. The neural interface device still attached to Elias' temple allowed him to sense the ship's systems and, more distractingly, echoes of Via's emotions. Her tension, her determination, and something deeper whenever she looked at him. Will we be safe here? He asked, helping her power down the ship's more noticeable systems. Nowhere is truly safe, she replied. But Zeth owes me a life debt and has extensive connections. If anyone can help us locate the second artifact, it's him. Since their escape 3 days ago, they had existed in a strange intimacy aboard the small vessel. Via had taught Elias to interface with more of her technology, while he had shared stories of Earth and human history. With each exchange, the connection between them had grown stronger, more undeniable. The docking clamps engaged with a shudder, and Via removed her royal insignia, replacing it with a trader's emblem. We travel as merchants seeking rare artifacts, she instructed, handing Elias nondescript clothing that would help him blend with the station's diverse population. Your name is Terran, mine is Nixa. When they disembarked, Elias was overwhelmed by the cacophony of sounds, smells, and sights of the station's main promenade. Species he had never encountered moved through market stalls selling technology and treasures from 1,000 worlds. Via moved confidently through the crowd, her hand occasionally brushing his, each contact sending a small electrical current through his body that he suspected had nothing to do with her alien physiology. They were met at a private lift by a towering, four-armed being with skin like burnished copper and eyes that shifted color with each blink. The ghost princess returns, the being rumbled quietly, ushering them inside the lift. You take great risks, Via. Necessity outweighs caution, old friend, she replied. This is Elias, the human I told you about. The beacon responded to him. Zeth's kaleidoscope eyes fixed on Elias with newfound interest. Truly, after all these centuries, he extended one massive hand. Then you are welcome, Starsinger. Starsinger? Elias questioned as they ascended toward the station's uppermost spire. One who can awaken our ancient technology, Via explained. It's a term of reverence among my people. Zeth's private quarters occupied an entire level of the spire, with windows offering spectacular views of the nebula. After securing the room against surveillance, the station master activated a holographic display. "Dracos has declared you both enemies of the Australian Consortium," he stated, showing images of their faces alongside substantial bounties. "Every mercenary in 3 sectors will be hunting you." "We expected as much," Via said. "What of the second artifact? Have your sources located it?" Zeth nodded. "The Royal Circlet was sold to a collector on Vashira Prime. He doesn't know what he has, believes it merely an ancient art piece." "Vashira Prime is heavily guarded," Via frowned. "We'll need more than just the 2 of us to infiltrate it." "3," corrected a new voice. They turned to see a lean, feline-like being step from the shadows, golden eyes fixed on Via with unmistakable emotion. "Hello, Princess. It's been a long time." Tarek, Via breathed, a complex mix of emotions flooding through the neural link: surprise, affection, wariness. "I thought you were dead." "Nearly so after your exile," the newcomer replied, approaching cautiously. "I've spent centuries building a network of those still loyal to you. When the beacon activated, we knew it was time." Elias felt a sharp, unexpected pang of jealousy as Tarek clasped Via's forearm in what was clearly a gesture of deep significance. The alien's eyes flicked to Elias, narrowing slightly. "This is the human, the one compatible with our technology." "This is Elias," Via corrected firmly. "Without him, I would still be in exile." Over the next hours, they formed their plan. Tarek had assembled a small but dedicated crew of rebels, species from worlds that had once benefited from Via's rule before her cousin's regime turned to exploitation. With their help, they would infiltrate Vashira Prime during its annual celestial gala, retrieve the circlet, and escape before Dracos' forces could respond. As preparations continued, Elias found himself alone with Via on an observation deck, the swirling colors of the nebula casting her silver hair in prismatic hues. "You and Tarek," he said carefully, "you have history." She turned to him, violet eyes serious. "We were to be bonded before my exile. He was my general, my closest advisor." "Bonded's like married." "Similar but more profound, a joining of minds as well as bodies." She stepped closer to him. "But that was centuries ago. I am not the same person who was exiled, and neither is he." Elias felt the neural interface warm against his temple. "And this connection between us, is it real, or just the technology recognizing compatible genetics?" Without warning, Via reached up and removed the interface from his skin. The sudden absence of her emotions left him feeling strangely hollow. "What do you feel now?" she asked softly. "Without the technology." Elias looked at her. This otherworldly, powerful being who had survived centuries of isolation, who fought for justice against overwhelming odds, who had somehow awakened something in him he hadn't known existed. "I feel," he began, then instead of finishing, he closed the distance between them, his hands framing her face as his lips found hers. The kiss was electric, a cascade of sensations unlike anything he'd experienced. Her skin emanated a subtle warmth that seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, her eyes had darkened to a deep violet that seemed to contain galaxies. "That," he said, "is what I feel without the technology." A smile broke across her face. Then perhaps the beacon merely confirmed what the universe already knew. She took his hand, placing it over the center of her chest, where he could feel the rapid rhythm of her alien heart. "My people believe that souls find each other across lifetimes, across species, across the void between stars." "Is that what we are?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Souls finding each other?" "I don't know," she answered honestly. "But I know that tomorrow we face great danger. We may not survive, and I would not want to die without knowing." Her words trailed off as she led him backward through the door to their assigned quarters. Inside, away from curious eyes, they discovered the ways their bodies could communicate what words could not, differences in biology overshadowed by the universal language of desire and connection. In the aftermath, lying tangled together as the station's artificial night cycle dimmed the lights, Via traced the contours of his face with gentle fingers. "If we succeed," she whispered, "I will become queen of a vast empire. My duties to my people must come first." Elias caught her hand, kissing her palm. "I understand duty. I'm not asking for promises." "But I would give them nonetheless," she replied. "Whatever comes tomorrow, whatever throne I may reclaim, know that you have changed me, Elias Mercer. You have taught me that exile gave me a gift, the freedom to choose my own path when I return." As sleep claimed them, wrapped in each other's arms, the nebula outside shifted colors from purple to gold. An auspicious omen had either been awake to see it. Tomorrow would bring danger, possibly death, as they moved to challenge a tyrant who had ruled unchecked for centuries. But tonight, an alien princess and a human archaeologist had found something rare and precious in the vastness of space, a connection that transcended species, time, and the very stars themselves. The royal palace of Astralis hung suspended in space, an architectural marvel of crystal and living metal orbiting a binary star system. From their vantage point aboard the cloaked infiltration vessel, Elias could barely breathe as he took in its impossible beauty. 7 massive spires arranged in a perfect heptagon, connected by translucent bridges that glittered with internal light. "My home," Via whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "After 3 centuries, I've returned." Today was the celestial concordance, a rare alignment of the binary stars that occurred once every 50 years. According to Tarek, Dracos had summoned representatives from every world in the Australian consortium to witness his ascension ceremony, the ritual that would cement his temporary regency into permanent rule. "Perfect timing," Elias commented, adjusting the formal Australian attire Tarek's people had provided. The silvery fabric felt like liquid against his skin, responding to his body temperature with subtle adjustments. He won't be expecting rivals at his coronation. Via's smile was predatory as she secured the repaired royal beacon to her ceremonial armor, especially not rivals long presumed dead. Their plan was audacious in its simplicity. Using falsified credentials provided by Zeth's contacts, they would enter the palace as minor diplomats from a distant outpost. Once inside, they would recover the royal circlet from the collector who would be displaying it as part of the ceremony. With both royal artifacts, the beacon and the circlet, in their possession, Via could establish her genetic claim before the assembled dignitaries. What happened after would depend on how many remembered the true princess and how many remained loyal to Dracos. "Are you ready?" Tarek asked, approaching in his own formal attire, his golden eyes lingering on Via with unmistakable devotion. In the days since Karshava Station, Elias had come to respect the feline warrior, understanding that his loyalty to Via was born of both personal affection and genuine belief in her right to rule. The tension between them had eased into a tacit understanding. Both men cared for her, but ultimately Via would choose her own path. "As ready as one can be to overthrow a galactic tyrant," Elias replied, checking the neural interface now permanently bonded to his temple. Through it, he could access the small arsenal of Australian weapons they had secreted aboard their diplomatic vessel. The palace docking procedures went smoothly, too smoothly, Elias thought with mounting unease. As they processed through security, he noticed guards exchanging subtle glances. "They know," he whispered through their private communication link. "Not yet," Via countered, "but they suspect. Move naturally. Our allies are already in position." The grand hall where the ceremony would take place was a cathedral-like space with a ceiling that seemed to capture and amplify the light of the binary stars. Hundreds of dignitaries from across the consortium filled the tiered seating, their diverse physiologies a testament to the vastness of Astralis's influence. At the center, on a raised dais, stood the collection of artifacts assembled for the ceremony, including a silver circlet inlaid with crystals that pulsed with the same energy signature as their beacon. And above it all, on a throne of shifting metal that responded to his movements, sat Dracos. Elias had seen images of Via's cousin, but they hadn't prepared him for the reality. Though physically similar to Via, with the same obsidian skin and silver hair, Dracos' features were sharpened by cruelty, his violet eyes flat and cold. "The collector is there," Tarek indicated with a subtle nod toward a corpulent being near the artifacts. "I'll create the diversion when the ceremony reaches the invocation phase." They separated, moving to their assigned positions as the ceremony began. Ancient music filled the hall, harmonics that resonated in Elias' bones through some property of the palace's construction. Guards stood at attention as Dracos rose, arms outstretched to accept the adulation of the gathered representatives. "Citizens of the Australian consortium," Dracos' voice reverberated without apparent amplification. For 3 centuries, I have served as regent during our time of transition. Today, as the twin stars align, I take my rightful place as Emperor of Astralis. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Emperor, not king. A significant distinction, according to Via, signaling Dracos' intent to expand beyond traditional boundaries. As attendants brought forward the ceremonial regalia, Elias tensed. The royal circlet would be presented soon. He touched the neural interface, ensuring their weapons were ready to deploy. Before we proceed, Dracos continued, I would acknowledge our honored guests. His gaze swept the hall, then fixed with predatory focus directly on their position, including those who believe they attend in secret. Guards moved with coordinated precision, surrounding their section of the hall. Tarek's hand went to his concealed weapon. Wait, Via commanded through their link. Then, to Elia's shock, she removed her diplomatic disguise and stepped forward into the open space before the dais. A collective gasp rippled through the assembly. Recognition dawned on the faces of the older dignitaries, disbelief on the younger. Hello, cousin, Via called, her voice carrying the unmistakable resonance of royal blood. You seem surprised to see me alive. Dracos recovered quickly, his shock masked by a cold smile. A clever impersonator, he announced to the crowd. Security, remove this pretender. I am no pretender, Via replied, activating the royal beacon. It unfolded in her hand, bathing her in light that corresponded to patterns inlaid in the palace floor, patterns that now illuminated in response. I am Princess Via Kaelor, rightful heir to the Australian throne, falsely accused of treason and wrongfully exiled. The guards hesitated, confused by the ancient technology's response to her. Dracos' expression hardened. The criminal speaks truly about one thing, she is indeed Via, a traitor who sought to share our sacred technology with lesser species, who would have diluted our genetic purity with outsiders. He pointed accusingly, as evidenced by her human pet. All eyes turned to Elias, who stepped forward to stand beside Via. The neural interface warmed against his skin. I am no pet, he stated clearly. I am a scientist who accidentally activated a beacon your predecessor hid on a forgotten moon, a beacon that recognized my genetic compatibility with your technology. Impossible, Dracos hissed. No human could. Before he could finish, Elias raised his hand toward the collection of artifacts. Responding to the neural interface, the royal circlet vibrated, then rose from its display and flew across the hall to hover before him. Gasps and exclamations filled the chamber. The circlet, one of the most sacred royal artifacts, had responded to an outsider. The ancient texts speak of this, an elder dignitary called out. The Starsinger, one not of our blood who nonetheless can command our most sacred technology. It is a sign. Dracos' facade cracked. Guards, kill them both. Chaos erupted as Tarek and their hidden allies revealed themselves, engaging the palace guards. Via seized the floating circlet, placing it upon her head as the beacon in her hand pulsed with increasing intensity. People of Astralis, she called above the commotion, her voice amplified by the circlet. For 3 centuries, you have lived under the rule of a usurper who imprisoned your rightful queen and led you toward isolation and stagnation. The royal artifacts, now united, created a display of light and energy that swept through the hall. Historical records stored within them projected scenes from Via's reign, her diplomatic triumphs, technological advances, and the treachery that led to her downfall. Lies, Dracos screamed, drawing a weapon. All lies. He fired at Via, but Elias, acting on instinct enhanced by the neural interface, stepped between them. The blast struck his shoulder, searing pain through his body. Through their connection, he felt Via's fury ignite. With a gesture, she commanded the living metal of the palace itself. It responded, flowing like quicksilver to restrain Dracos and his most loyal guards. The fighting stuttered to a halt as the palace, itself a royal artifact of immense power, recognized its true mistress. I do not seek vengeance, Via announced, moving to Elias' side and placing her hand over his wound. The contact sent healing energy through his body, dulling the pain. I seek restoration. Astralis was once a beacon of cooperation and exchange among species. Under Dracos, we have become feared isolationists, hoarding our knowledge and treating other species as inferiors. She turned to Elias, taking his hand in full view of the assembly. This human activated our most sacred technology not through theft or trickery, but because the universe itself recognizes something our ancient ancestors knew. True advancement comes through connection, not isolation. Murmurs of agreement spread through the crowd, especially from representatives of worlds that had suffered under Draco's exploitative policies. The time of regency is over, Via declared. But so too is the time of monarchy. I claim my rightful place not as a queen demanding subservience, but as first citizen of a new Australian council, where all member worlds have voice and representation. The proclamation sent shockwaves through the assembly. Some protested but more voiced approval, especially as Tarek and their allies secured the remaining loyalist guards. Dracos, still restrained by the living metal, glared at his cousin. You would dilute our power for the sake of these lesser beings? This human has poisoned your mind. Villa approached him calmly. No, Dracos, he opened it, just as our ancestors intended when they created technology that could recognize compatible beings regardless of species. She touched his face with unexpected gentleness. You will face justice for your crimes, cousin, but not execution, not exile. We will be better than that. As the hours passed, allegiances shifted. Ancient noble houses declared for Villa, while diplomatic representatives welcomed the promise of a more equitable consortium. By nightfall, Dracos had been secured in the palace's diplomatic quarters, imprisoned but treated with the dignity Villa herself had been denied. In her private chambers, overlooking the binary sunset, Villa found Elias gazing at the spectacular view, his wounded shoulder now fully healed by Australian medical technology. So, he said without turning, sensing her presence through their connection, First Citizen Villa has a nice ring to it. She moved to stand beside him, her ceremonial armor replaced by simpler attire. More work than Queen would have been, building a council, establishing new treaties, undoing centuries of isolation. She took his hand. It could take decades. Sounds like you could use a cultural liaison, Elias suggested, turning to face her. Someone familiar with how other species might perceive Australian overtures, maybe even someone with a background in archaeology and anthropology. Villa's smile was radiant. Is that an application for a position, Dr. Mercer? It's a promise, he replied, drawing her closer. Whatever challenges rebuilding brings, you won't face them alone. The neural interface warmed between them as their minds touched through the technology that had brought them together. In that connection, deeper than words, they shared their hopes for the future, a future where an exiled princess and a curious archaeologist would forge a new path for an ancient civilization. Outside, the twin stars of Astralis completed their alignment, bathing the palace in golden light, a new dawn for an empire reborn, and for the unlikely pair whose bond would help reshape the stars themselves. Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.